Hey, hey, hey. Welcome back to Trek Chat, everyone, a podcast brought to you by Trek on the Tube. I am your host, Sean. That never changes, or at least not for the moment. I'm joined today by two very special guests. One is kind of becoming a regular at this point. Starfleet Boy, how you doing?
Very good. Great to be on again.
It's great to have you back. And
Thank you.
The Starfleet Boy sidekick, dare I say, the person with no YouTube channel and not really a Twitter presence, but the one that you've seen on so many episodes of Starfleet Boy, the Doctor. How you doing?
All right, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
By the way, I corrected Sean on Starfleet Boy yesterday. I said that I'm actually the sidekick.
Oh yes, that's right. You're the sidekick.
That's right. So
No,
I'm the sidekick to the Doctor.
no. Not true, not true at all. Not true.
Well, you're both sidekicks here. I'm the host.
Yes, that's true. that is true.
Yes.
That we can agree
We're
on.
the special guest stars, yes.
We dealt with that problem. I wanted to. So you guys know the topic, or you guys don't know the topic yet? I know that Starfleet Boy does.
Yeah, he told me
Okay,
it
you
was
shared
use of the holodeck to introduce other
Franchises, basically.
other
Franchises.
fictions like Superman and
To do crossovers.
do
So
crossovers.
this is a thing that I've been thinking about for years, and like when I was a kid, I thought it was very interesting. So I'll give you a bit of context here. As a child, I thought that the holodeck was awesome, and I thought that the holodeck had a lot of potential to be used as basically a way to cross over to my other favorite shows. So you could do like an episode with the actual actors of whatever other show. If you want to do a show like the Arrowverse shows, they've got the Flash and what have you. You can do a actually crossover with the actual actors, but just pretend that they're holodeck characters in the holodeck. And I thought that was interesting. And what made me think about this again is recently I've been talking about Gargoyles, the animated TV show, and Trick sent me a funny meme with it. Like there's so many Star Trek talents and Star Trek voices used in that show, and he's like, oh, it was just a holodeck program. And so it got me thinking that would be so fun to think that Gargoyles was a holodeck program. But now that I'm an adult, it kind of
genius.
scares me because, I talked about Boat Rick. Boat Rick watches Westworld with me, and
Oh, I'm watching that show too.
I don't want to spoil too much of what's going on, but we get a
Yeah, don't, because I'm only midway through season 2,
Okay.
so don't even say anything at all. I'm sorry. I
Well-
have to stop you.
there's a reference to another show. That's it. There's like a reference to
okay.
there's a visual reference to another show on Westworld, and Westworld is kind of a holodeck in a way. Not really, but it's kind of like a video game kind of thing. So what do we think about this? What do we think about using Star Trek, or the Star Trek's holodeck or holographic technology to tie into other franchises? Does that feel kind of cheap?
I think it's great, and I wish they had done it on TNG because we could have had some amazing crossovers like MacGyver. You could have had like Sequest. You could have. I wish they had done it.
So you think of a
TNG
specific
was
show though,
airing.
because we can't have The Walking Dead or something, R-rated or whatever, like too extreme pop up in Star Trek.
Well, now
Well,
you
now
can.
you can,
I mean,
I
Star Trek
guess.
Discovery doesn't
Would you-
care.
would-
Star Trek Discovery doesn't care if it's like, But back then you did have to. I mean, you could have had a Full House crossover with Star Trek.
Oh man.
I
It could have been
knew
an
the Doctor would
amazing
love
thing.
this.
It could-
I knew you would be interested.
This well no that when I read because Sohel sent me the topic ahead of time, and I started thinking about it, and I was like, wow, this is interesting. And then hearing Sean, listening to how you came about to this idea, I thought you were going to mention Voyager, because I know Voyager certainly did. I mean, if you look at the what's the sci-fi one it's basically Flash Gordon, but
It's Captain Proton is what they were
Captain
doing.
Proton.
Yeah, that's it. That's the
I
Tom
mean,
Paris
that's-
program that he plays
right.
with Kim, his friend, Harry Kim.
Right. I mean, that's basically Buster Crabbe Flash Gordon. I mean, the style, the look, the costumes. There's a guy who looks just like Ming the Merciless. So I felt that was. I thought maybe that was the origin of all this.
Dixon Hill's kind of like Dick Tracy, if you want to kind of connect. I don't know. Maybe that's too.
Dixon Hill is very generic.
Disparate,
I thought. It's just a kind of a generic. But what they did in Voyager with Captain Proton, if you look at the style, there's no debate. They're trying to do 1930s Buster Crabbe, Flash Gordon. It's very specific.
Right.
And so I guess my question to you, Sean, is, or to both of you, is when you're saying a crossover, do you mean to say a crossover in the sense that to let's say whoever's going in the holodeck, let's say it's on the Enterprise, to Riker and Barclay or whomever, the crossover element, whether it be Walking Dead or Full House or whatever, that's part of their fiction, and they're trying to interact with it, which is what Voyager was doing. Okay.
That's what I would imagine, because I don't see how, like, realistically you could kind of have the universe of The Walking Dead interact with the universe of Star Trek, even if recently the creator of The Walking Dead shows kind of said that the virus is of alien origin. I still don't know how we could tie those in correctly from a story standpoint, but in the world of Star Trek, in the universe of Star Trek, they did have movies and they did have television shows back in the 90s, back in the 2000s.
And Enterprise establishes that some of those movies are actually lined up with movies that exist in the real world. So there's like a real kind of, I think,
on Enterprise they keep on watching these old Paramount movies, don't they?
I mean, like, for convenience's sake, but I mean, ultimately that means that not on screen, in the realm of imagination, for sure there's people that are doing Walking Dead holodeck program recreations and MacGyver and Full House,
Absolutely.
All joking aside, but that's happening on a very imaginative level. That's definitely happening in the background.
Yes, the whole Tom Paris thing probably was something like, this is probably what sparked my imagination as a kid, because like seeing Captain Proton as a child, I was like, imagine if Tom Paris was playing something that I was currently watching on TV or that I enjoyed. But then recently, when I rewatched Voyager with Wife on the 2, Wife is a big fan of Jane Austen, and Captain Janeway has this Jane Austen-esque type of program. She's, she comes into this household in Victorian England, and she's the new, I think she's the new nanny or something that's going on. Imagine for a minute there, Mr. Starfleet Boy, if Captain Janeway, Kate Mulgrew, could walk into the Downton Abbey set.
Exactly.
Or onto the Crown set with the actors of the Crown, and she were to be playing that holodeck program.
It won't be Captain Janeway unless they do a Captain Janeway Star Trek spinoff like they did for Jean-Luc, but it could be Burnham or any of these characters. I mean, the potential's there, and I do think, like, there was a time, and maybe this is just my nostalgia making it seem more in fashion than it actually was, but when I was a kid, I just feel like I remember there was a lot of goodwill between all these, like, creative IPs and endeavors, like before that word intellectual property even existed in the mainstream. I would say that, like, I feel like when I was younger, and maybe it was just between studios, but it felt like there was a lot more of this kind of crossover and, like, fun tongue-in-cheek type of thing happening. And I get that in Star Trek they want to stay as, like, far away from dating it or making it, timely or, things like that. But I think that this idea of yours is the one exception, because it can, it can totally go, as far out as you want to, up to, a character visiting another show, so I love it. I think it's a good idea. I think it should be done. But the question is, what's the big crossover today that you could do that would appeal to audiences the most? You mentioned Game of Thrones.
I think the biggest thing would be Captain America and Iron Man and the superheroes, wouldn't it? But then, like, a Star Trek show could never afford to have Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr.
They might be fans. You never know. Christian Slater was such a big actor, and he, I'm sure,
Actually,
took concessions
to
go on.
It would be hilarious
Star Trek 6.
If like Captain Jean-Luc Picard walks into like a kid playing the X-Men program.
Oh, that would have been hilarious.
and so Sir Patrick Stewart is both Captain Jean-Luc Picard or Jean-Luc Picard, but also Xavier, a holodeck version of Xavier.
Not to go off topic, but I'm very confused with the last X-Men film, the Dark Phoenix one. I am like I don't understand what I witnessed or saw, and maybe because the two of you are more into it, you could on a side chat sometime explain to me what happens, because it seems like it's totally bonkers.
It feels more like an episode of something than an actual movie.
How are they younger than their older selves in the future of their older selves?
What?
No, it's two different.
There's a new timeline. There was a timeline separation.
Oh,
that's it.
Oh, yeah. Another new timeline.
Yeah,
Here we go.
Yeah. So you
that's the answer for everything. It's the Kelvin timeline.
Exactly. You who detest timelines, know this. X-Men separated into two timelines. They just did it in a much more complicated way than what Star Trek 09 did.
Then Star Trek was. Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Okay, so you walk into the holodeck and it's like a different franchise or a different property that's playing that kind of stuff. But there's a potential to, in the same style that they did Moriarty becoming a villain greater than Data. Imagine, because now in the Star Trek universe that were presented by Picard, you can have bloody holodecks and hollow people walking around everywhere. What if you, like, the same kind of thing would happen with, like, a Superman character? You program the holodeck to make your Superman really, like, that intelligent or that strong or what have you. Stronger than Data, faster than Data. But he has the potential, because he has, I don't know, he maybe has, like, a special emitter, like the Doctor from Voyager, and he can just fly around everywhere. Would it then be dangerous to start doing that kind of crossover, where you have an actual Superman flying around the universe? It's just that he's holographic.
I mean, I feel like what you're talking about kind of maybe exists to some degree on Free Cloud. It's the potential is there if we're going to talk about Picard, but I think that wouldn't last very long, because I don't know, you'd have to have hollow emitters that can fly through the sun, or change the orbit of a planet, or have it spin in the opposite direction to go back in time. Like, that would be a pretty impressive hollow emitter technology. I mean, at that point,
it is true. You got Superman flying around. You just target the hollow emitter with your phases.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think that specific example could happen, but I do think that this is an interesting potential, again, still in the world of imagination, but Moriarty now has a true chance in this Picard to live outside the confines. Now he's in there, I think, because he's too dangerous, maybe his intellect, I don't know, or maybe he has truly reformed, I don't know. Part of me wants to believe that the professor has grown past his his literary origins. But
they could use him. They could use him as the Khan of Picard.
I mean, if done well, that could play out so amazingly. But I don't know. I can't envision doing it well myself. So I'm not sure.
No,
it would be over the top.
Yeah, I think it would be. I think this discussion kind of, what it makes me think about is what exactly, because obviously, we're talking about, a pop culture, right? And what pop culture survived after the eugenic wars and all that stuff? Because, when I was a kid, and just in my own headcanon, I was trying to figure out, well, why doesn't Captain Kirk ever...
We know the Rolling Stones survive.
Do we?
The Stones survive. Yeah, no, they have to.
No, well,
Have you seen
I
their
was
latest
actually
video?
going. I was actually going to go in that direction. There's very few examples of uh, of music that we know that has, appeared in Star Trek. I mean, certainly we know Roy Orbison.
It seems
survived.
like only classical music.
Yeah, they call it all classical
in
music.
concert.
But
Yeah,
we heard a Roy Orbison song in First Contact.
That's true.
If
Hoobie
in,
doobie.
the 2009 Star Trek, there's Beastie Boys.
It's post 90s music. It's like post 90s pop culture doesn't seem to pop up in Star Trek very often, because every time they do reference something, it's something from like the 80s or the 70s, or as you're saying, it's something like the friggin' holodeck program from Tom Paris, which is really old.
So can we
Well,
blame the
it's easier
eugenics
to
wars
know.
on like obliterating pop culture then?
I wonder
after a
then,
certain point?
because a lot of people think that. So the theory is we live
like
in
that.
the timeline of Star Trek. I don't think so. I think that the prime timeline is a different timeline from us, and then our reality is different. And it would be interesting to think that the eugenics wars in through the 80s and the 90s, through like the eugenics wars and World War III, that all kind of destroyed everything that we know post 90s in pop culture.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that came out, like all of these new movies, like so I suppose you could do a crossover to the original Ghostbusters.
You know what's interesting about that is that when another good explanation is that when the bird of prey was orbiting the Earth in the 80s in Star Trek 4, it actually downloaded everything that could be downloaded into its databanks and took that back to the future, restoring
Why?
also a lot of pop culture.
I don't understand why the bird of prey would be doing that. But
It's just the standard scan.
that's your own
Like there
headcanon,
could
I
be a
guess.
scene. There could no exactly, but I'm just saying like that could be a reason to explain why it's only 80s and before, like nothing from the 90s.
well, no,
survived
because the eugenic wars
you know,
take
it's
place
like-
in the 90s, so obviously that's when
right, that's true.
right
that too.
that's when it kind of stops, and then whatever survives after is people's memories of.
Well, it just backs up that.
of
I'm just
right.
trying to figure out a way to get the Rolling Stones
well, the Rolling
back
Stones
into
exist
canon.
in the 60s, so ideally they would still be there. We just don't have the last 4 albums, I guess.
What's
wouldn't
fun
have The
is
Walking
I
Dead.
wish I had my.
You wouldn't have The Walking Dead.
I wish I
you
had my.
wouldn't-
Yeah.
Well, I don't know when Game of Thrones. I don't know when he started writing them, but you wouldn't have the show. So I guess like I said, in my own. This is my own thinking. Is on the different Star Trek shows, everything we've seen has been older pop culture, if you want to call it that. We've seen great literature, like you indicated the Jane Austen thing. We've seen Arthur Conan Doyle. We've seen the pulp crime mysteries. We saw, like you said, apparently the Paramount Film Library managed to survive. Thank God.
Well, I'm thinking, did we
But
did,
beyond that-
I forget what Enterprise showed us, but I feel like they showed us. I don't know if it's these movies specifically or equivalents, but like we got some of the like Bride of Frankenstein, that kind of stuff. I think we got all of those, the black and white kind of original
Well, that would have been Universal. Okay, yeah,
monster movies. I think.
right.
Much like Discovery did in Calypso, which is. A really
Oh, we
good
got
episode.
Biddy Boop
It showed
in
us
that.
Well,
Yeah.
I
Which-
actually
which
have
was
a
odd, 'cause
real.
who references Biddy Boop today?
Well, I have a real world explanation for that.
I do.
Oh,
Which
really?
is
Okay.
which is that the United States, they every year they announce a list of movies and music that become part of the archive at the Library of Congress, and
Yes.
these items are preserved for posterity, and the Library of Congress actually goes out of its way to enact special preservation procedures so that these films and this music is preserved in their archive for all time. And
I know.
so,
I know this, and I know that a lot of actual other countries do this
right.
because Tupac, his discography has been archived at the Vatican.
There we go. That's a great That's a great
Interesting.
example.
That's really
so
interesting.
imagine after. Okay, go ahead.
I think also beyond that, I just want to remind you that we've been broadcasting up until recently pretty much the entirety of anything that's been on cinema or film into space via AM and FM and VHF and UHF. So it's all out there. And as we know from Doctor Who, if it hits an asteroid, it can reflect back, and you can actually find episodes that you thought were once lost. I'm not even joking.
Love
that. Like, this is real.
Really
We're talking about archiving
so
things.
real.
He's all about aliens capturing movies.
Well, I'm just saying Betty Boop could have been one of the odd things that like ricocheted through the cosmos and made it,
So
3,000 years.
Starfleet Boy wants the first aliens to come to Earth with like heaps of Looney Tunes references and stuff.
That's that movie.
That's The Explorers, yes.
Basically, that you
Joe
just
Dante,
described. If you ever watched.
So wouldn't it be interesting if when Federation first made contact and were making cultural segues into what the Klingons, they learned that the Klingons are really big Betty Boop fans, and it's because hundreds of years ago they found these cartoons, and they're like, oh,
That's
this is
why
great.
Lursa. That's why Lursa and B'Etor wear such provocative outfits. It's because of the influence of Betty Boop. Boop boop be-doo.
Okay, so on a more personal note, if you were to watch an episode, whatever kind of show this new, like whatever new Star Trek show you're watching, whether it's episodic or serialized, all of a sudden they walk into the holodeck, or there's like a holo program or something that's happening, and it is an entirely other franchise that's crossed over. Do you feel like you've been taken out of Star Trek? Like, is your experience diminished or is it enhanced? Are you guys happy about this?
If it's in the context of the holodeck, for me, there's no. I can choose to ignore it, or I can just choose to accept it as like a fantasy type thing. So it works. It doesn't bother me in the least. I think it. I mean, I may not be as interested in a Walking Dead holodeck episode as I would be, like I said earlier, in a MacGyver or Sequest holodeck episode or a Battlestar. That would be a neat crossover too. Is Battlestar Galactica in Star Trek. But I would say that, and then which one? Like which one do you do? But I would say that, I think it's a good idea. I hope that we're in a time in television where it can be pulled off like kind of flawlessly and beautifully and done in a way that's fun. But I don't know if anyone wants to put the effort into doing it. I don't know if that's gonna ever if we're ever gonna see something like this happen.
I mean, if it were to happen somehow, it would obviously be a moment of, it would take me out, but it would take me out, and I think, assuming it's done well, in a good way. And there's a moment I may be referencing two shows that are too obscure, but there's an episode of the A-Team. So hell, I know you know the A-Team, and
I know the A-Team,
and
yes.
There's an actor in it, Dirk Benedict, who was and
another actor in it who's in Star Trek.
Yes, but the what I'm referencing is there's a moment where the character he plays, Face, in the A-Team is on a movie set, and he sees a Cylon from the original Battlestar Galactica walk past,
that episode.
and Dirk Benedict kind of does this like double take, and he kind of looks at the Cylon, and then you continue, and that's certainly a moment that
because he's on both shows.
on both
that's
shows.
So great.
So
that would have been if Barkley did an A-Team holodeck episode. Could you imagine? That would have been like the same thing but times 10. It would have been really great if that had happened.
if somehow on the holodeck Mr.
Mad Dog
T,
Murdoch
had shown up, I think that would have been So I guess
oh man, Mr. T
I've only
on
seen the
TNG.
A-Team movie with I've only seen the A-Team movie with Liam Neeson and Bradley Cooper.
Oh, I've never seen that.
Bradley Cooper
Okay,
was
never
playing the
seen it.
character that I was referencing. So
Okay.
the character that actor was on the original Battlestar Galactica. So it would have been
Who plays Mr. T on the remake?
I barely remember.
I don't think he's
this
a
movie.
well-known actor.
Then the remake was terrible.
I
If you
don't.
can't
I don't.
remember who Mr. T was.
I have virtually no memories of this. I think by the end of the movie, there's like they land a
tank?
tank by falling it from the sky, and
Yes.
so they shoot towards the ground so that the tank kind of it slows the tank down. I remember it being dumb.
Well, the original show.
Well,
was
I
dumb,
want to thank.
So
Was it comedy?
I want to
This was
thank the
this was a
doctor
comedy
for
movie.
It was
bringing up
borderline
the
comedy. Yeah,
A-team.
it was
Okay.
it was cartoon.
It was comedy action. It was
Yeah.
a new concept, I would say. Actually, it was kind of a new concept for TV at the time, but it worked really well. I
It
loved
did.
watching
No,
it
I
with my
enjoyed
family.
it. I enjoyed
Yeah.
it. But yeah, it was dumb fun. I mean,
Okay,
to be sure.
but I have nothing against that. I quite enjoy the Expendables movies.
That's a good example. It's a lighter version.
Starsky
of-
and Hutch,
yeah.
my
So you want to see the A-Team?
No.
that would have been a perfect one for TNG, though, in my mind. I think that would have been a great one if they had done it during TNG, just because you have what is the actor's name? I'm drawing a blank right now. Who plays
Dwight Schultz.
Barkley? Dwight Schultz, thank you. Who's genius, brilliant man, by the way. I've heard him on a few podcasts, and it would be awesome to talk to him. But Dwight Schultz plays both those characters, and it would have been really quite a contrast. And in fact, that was one of the things that surprised when Barkley first appeared on TNG. It's like I think he kind of Dwight Schultz broke the mold of typecast, as I think everyone kind of saw him as Mad Dog Murdoch. And here now I only see him as Barkley, of course, but I thought that was a great showcase of the immense talent that he has to do these disparate characters too, which is
I think TNG did kind of do it. They didn't do it with like intellectual property, but they did it with people, like popular people, in the sense that we got Data playing cards with what was it, Isaac Newton,
And Hawkins.
there was Stephen Hawkins,
Yeah.
which has been
Yeah.
a very popular
and
person in
Einstein.
pop culture for a long time, and then Einstein.
and it's the real Stephen
And it is the
Hawking,
real.
which is amazing.
So like we
of
could do
course.
one with
Yeah, so-
like there could be Neil deGrasse
Neil
Tyson
deGrasse
pop
Tyson.
up or something.
Yeah.
That could be fun.
That's true. That's true.
Like you have him
It's
actually
a
doing an
shame we-
episode of like Cosmos explaining it, and then you just got like young kids. Well, maybe that information will be dated by the time we get to the Star Trek. Maybe they would know more about the universe than what Neil deGrasse Tyson is explaining to us today. But
By the way, since I think it's a shame we never got Carl Sagan on Star Trek, but his son Nick Sagan wrote for TNG, which is pretty cool,
really,
if I'm not mistaken.
okay.
I might be wrong.
I know he's written novels, but I didn't realize he wrote for Star Trek.
I think here television credits. Let's see. Yep, he did Star Trek Voyager, a ton of Star Trek Voyager, and he did the next episode of TNG. Ironically, that Starfleet Boy is doing, Bloodlines, which has Captain Picard's
Oh my
son.
god, look at this.
So,
We're doing crossovers with our podcasts.
Oh my gosh.
I know,
look at that.
podcast crossovers. But yeah, you reminded me. But when you said Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's like a student of Carl Sagan, so it would have been cool to have Sagan on there somewhere too.
I will say that there are certain shows and movies or whatever that I would not have wanted to have happen.
That's
only
that's
because
in all caps. Not.
Yes, not because I want to imagine that they're not fiction in the Star Trek universe, but they're possible. You know, that they're, you know, and
Like The Expanse.
well, I was going to say Doctor Who. You know, that there were
Doctor Who,
rumors, and I've never been able to find very hard evidence that any discussions were really taking place. But there were rumors that during the very early years of Next Generation and during the last years of Doctor Who, the original show, there were talks of possibly having the Doctor appear on Star Trek. And
those rumors would be supported to an extent by a comic book crossover that did happen with the 11th Doctor and the Next Generation.
And the
or
Next
was
Generation
the original
crew.
series crew?
No, it was, well,
original crew,
they have
yeah,
one
so,
flashback to the original series. They put, it's very clever. They have the fourth Doctor, who is the most popular of the
At that time.
that the original
cool.
show was on.
Yeah, so Doctor Who, at least the closest thing you can have to on-screen canon occurred, which is comic book or novels. You know, so that was pretty cool.
Right.
So
But
we
then-
haven't talked about the big one yet.
Which is?
Star Wars.
Oh no.
As it stands, the Kelvin timeline did get actual. Well, even First Contact. First Contact had a what's the bloody ship called in Star Wars? Millennium Falcon. Star Trek: The Next First Contact had an
That's an Easter egg.
It is
for
an Easter
sure.
egg, and then Star Trek 09 got an R2D2 floating around. In space.
Yeah, but those
are
I think
Easter
those are meant
eggs.
as
No, they are.
gags.
They're meant as
Yeah, they're
as
Easter eggs.
jokes and what have yous. Would you?
But you're right. That's the closest they've touched on it. Certainly, I would say that there's a lot of crossover between talent from Star Wars and Star Trek, and certainly like the people at ILM are huge Star Trek fans. And
I
certainly
wouldn't
George
enjoy them to
Lucas
cross
even-
over though. Like to actually cross over as being like the two universes
But in
meet.
this-
I wouldn't like that. I wouldn't mind.
But in this
I
holodeck
wouldn't mind
scenario, it'd be neat if you had elements
Elnor.
like maybe Worf.
Elnor and
Well,
Worf.
maybe.
They do a
That
lightsaber
or-
fight.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Is you could introduce the lightsaber in a holodeck
It's a
program,
light
and that would be an
bat'leth.
interesting, or the lightsaber itself, and use it as a actual. And then they could say like they don't even have to get specific, and they could say it's a sparring tool from a fictional film franchise.
that would be cheap.
Of
That would be cheap.
tw-
I would be very. That
What?
would be cheap if they didn't actually like. If I would not like it if they did a kind of knockoff lightsaber and they didn't call it a lightsaber because they didn't have the right.
I didn't say it's a knockoff. I said it was the lightsaber. But
They would have to call it
the
that.
character. The character was vague about it. That's all.
I would feel cheated.
That's funny. You got very.
No, I would
passionate
feel
about
cheated
that
because
one.
I mean Shazam gave like okay, at the end of Shazam, spoilers but not really. There's a cameo appearance by the character Superman, but
Oh yeah.
there's no
right.
face reveal, so we don't see it's
Yeah,
Henry
it is
Cavill because
cheap.
it isn't Henry Cavill,
Wait,
and
there
that
is.
felt cheap
Wait
to
a
me.
wait a second. Wait a second. Wait a second. Wait a second. I saw Shazam. I don't remember.
Yeah, in the
the
cafeteria.
Superman cameo.
Remember? They all leave the cafeteria and
Now I gotta watch that movie.
No,
again,
don't watch the bloody
unfortunately.
movie. Watch just the scene. What are you doing? Come on.
Okay.
oh wow. Yeah.
Link that scene to me, Sean.
I'll try and find it. There's
Okay, so I have to know, what did thumbs up or thumbs down on Shazam?
me.
Yeah.
Oh, thumbs down. Personally.
Ooh, wow. Okay.
I do. Okay, I'll tell you what though. I watch quite a few channels online that review films, and I watch them for different reasons. Sometimes I just want to know what they think of the movies. Some channels I think people are very articulate, and I kind of try and learn how they speak and like learn how to say things better for my reviews.
Oh, I love that.
But I know that most of the channels that I watch actually very much enjoyed Shazam, and I'm talking about people that I usually agree with. And mostly when I come out of a movie, everything I think is very much reflected by what they say. But then when it came to Shazam, most people enjoyed it and I didn't. I don't know why. I don't know if it has to do with age and maybe like the references or it's a generational thing. But
It's a kids movie. It's definitely aimed at. It's not aimed at.
I think I
us.
would have liked it a lot more when I was a kid.
It's not aimed at us. It's aimed at a younger demographic, and I just thought it was interesting that DC was doing that, because I feel that Marvel targets all their movies at just one broad general audience, and DC seems to be
Doesn't
doing
know
the
what they're doing.
opposite. Right, they're going for different, they're going for a different demographic with say a harder edged movie like. I'm drawing a blank, but I'm sure there's a harder edged movie out there somewhere. It's DC. Well, the new Batman that's coming out.
well, Batman v Superman was pretty hardcore.
Batman versus Superman. That's true. I wouldn't take a young kid to see that movie.
I would say the Christopher Nolan. Are the Christopher Nolan Batmans not DC?
Yeah,
but
that's,
we're trying
that's
to. I think we're talking about the DC EU, like the extended universe that they're trying to do here.
correct. Yeah.
But that's
gotcha,
because they also have this Arrowverse show, like all of these DC Arrowverse shows, and they're all very they're family friendly shows, right? Regardless of the quality of them, you can kind of just chuck them on and they're good fun because they are family friendly. They even have musical episodes, right? They don't take themselves that seriously.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that provides that kind of family friendly outlet.
I think of those shows the same as when I was growing up reading young adult novels. They're like meant for like specifically for
I
adolescents.
see what you mean.
So they're a little edgy. You know what I mean? They're a little edgier. They have sexual innuendo. There's like things like that, but it's not necessarily like for little kids. You know, like.
Well, I mean,
it's
yeah,
more
you've
for,
got.
like,
I mean, I work at a high school, so you know, when I order books, I have to be conscious to. You know, I'm ordering books that a junior high would not necessarily have. So yeah, I would think Shazam, the maxes out at the junior high level, but still, nonetheless, I thought it was like a family fantasy. Although there were a couple elements that I really did not like, that I thought were not family friendly. But anyways, that's Shazam. That's a whole other podcast.
That's a whole other thing.
That's a whole other thing. But I do want to ask you, because you
How do we get there? Yeah.
you brought up Star Wars, which is that's a big one. But now I'm going to ask you guys. Here's another big one.
Oh goodness.
And I have my and actually, so how
Are you going to say Middle Earth?
No, actually, no.
Oh, okay.
Alien.
Oh yes. See, this is the thing. I was going to mention it earlier because we were talking about like pre-90s. Alien was huge.
Which, by the way, today
in the
is
80s.
Alien
When you talk
Day.
Alien, you bring Blade Runner into it, by the way, because
Oh
it's
my
all the same
goodness, we could have a
corporation. It's all the same.
I would
thing.
love to see Ryan Gosling in Star Trek. Yes, because Blade Runner, I talk about Ryan Gosling and not Harrison Ford.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Wow,
Today is
he really
Alien Day,
gotcha.
by the way. Today's
He's
426.
Oh, is it?
LV4
Alien Day.
LV426 is the planet that
Okay.
they find in the original film.
Oh,
wow.
wow, that's deep
So
stuff
happy-
there.
Happy Alien
Happy
Day.
Xenomorph Day, everyone.
Yes, there we go.
Xenomorph Day. No wonder Dayton Ward posted a photo of himself today on Twitter with a xenomorph behind him. That makes sense.
And now you have context.
Now I have context, and context is for kings.
So, what about the alien?
I already think it is a part of the Star Trek universe.
Oh wait, you mean
in the Kelvin
the
in the Kelvin timeline.
you mean the alien, like the xenomorphs xenomorphs themselves?
all of that's in the Kelvin timeline as far as I'm concerned. It all lines up beautifully. The Weyland Yutani Corporation, the Dark Time, the Eugenics Wars, all of that goes into that.
Okay,
period
wait a
for me
minute.
as
So
far as I'm
is Species 8472 not Star Trek's kind of reaction to Alien?
I don't know enough about them yet to say.
Are the because they got these hunters too in
you're right.
Voyager. Those are the reaction to the
the Breen kind of and the Jem'Hadar kind of remind me of the Predator.
no
That's
the Predator is the other bloody hell, what are they called, the hunters from Voyager.
Oh, I don't know the.
These guys that they've got trophies of all of their kills and they put them in their ships and what have you.
Yeah,
They feel
that's the
very
Predator.
Predator.
Yeah, but they
I
like
forget what they're called.
if they somehow see, I would not want to see the alien in the holodeck. I would like to see
Hirogen.
the alien. Oh yes, you're right. Those are the
The
Predators.
Hirogen.
Right. So
I
I
don't
would
know them.
exclude Alien and Predator from the holodeck. I would not mind seeing them somehow crossover in let's say in universe, as opposed to
Wow.
hollow universe. I don't know if
That's
that's a
crazy.
term, but
Yeah, no, you
That's
you
another
don't,
thing
you don't
they
want to
could've
see them
done in
as
the TNG era.
you don't want to see them as fiction within the Star Trek universe. You want to see them as real. You want
correct.
to see them.
Yeah, forget about AVP. Let's do AVST.
Which the hell if you recall, I did write a Star Trek story.
I know
Yes,
you
thank
did
you.
do that.
Yeah,
It's
thank
true. It's true.
Yeah.
I just recalled now.
Yeah.
So for some reason, we've got
think I
rumors
made it
about
into a
We've
comic
got
book.
rumors.
If I'm not mistaken, sorry, this got really crazy, Sean. I hate to hijack, but I think I made a comic book of your story. Like
Yes.
I
Yes, you did.
remember. I did.
Yes.
Yes, I did.
I want
And-
to see
and-
this.
Go on.
Sean, and one more moment of hijacking. Sohail wrote a crossover between Star Trek and Jurassic Park, just for the record.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so
did.
that's
I
one.
did.
That's one. Going off the theory that in the 90s everything got screwed up, Jurassic Park still would have kind of existed, I suppose, maybe.
It's true.
It was like right borderline. Would you want to see a Jurassic Park crossover? Like, would you want? I
did
would
it.
love that.
there was
In
I would love
universe
that.
or Hollow universe?
I suppose, like, whichever. What one would you prefer? What one? In universe, I don't know.
I think.
I mean, you could
I
go
think
to
if
you
we're
could go
throwing
to a
things
planet.
like aliens in,
I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of dragons. I don't understand why we haven't been to a planet with its dragons.
we have in the animated
That's
series.
No, not really.
We could certainly have a planet with dinosaurs for sure. I mean, that could be a real thing in Star Trek. Like that. That's not out of the realm of possibility. In fact, that's what it should be. Jurassic Planet should be the next. That's the crossover. It's Jurassic World.
Jurassic.
They should
Jurassic
call it-
Universe.
Just Jurassic Universe, Jurassic Planet, and the crew, the crew of the La Serena get stranded on Jurassic Planet and have to escape
Oh God.
because all the paddocks are not working.
People praise Star Trek Picard for not having Picard run around too much, and then you want to have him stuck on a planet full of dinosaurs.
It would just be great to see him in that outfit that Sam Neill's wearing with a flare, and just throwing it. And then you could have a Sam Neill. That's an actor I'd like, by the way, on Star Trek. is
Jeff
Sam
Goldblum.
Neill. I
Jeff
think
Jeff Goldblum cameo.
Oh, for
He's
sure.
like an
There we
alien
go.
that's been stuck
they
on this
should all-
planet,
yeah.
and he now knows how to deal with these alien dinosaurs. So you could do alien designed dinosaurs.
That would be genius. I would love that. That would be like.
I think we're jumping the shark here on this discussion.
Okay, I
On this
have a
topic, I
question. I
should
have another
say.
question. This would be Hollow universe, of course.
Okay.
What sitcoms do you think should be featured in a Star Trek show in a holodeck?
Oh my goodness.
Well, I have to say The Big Bang Theory, just because it loved on Star Trek. So
That
So
works
you
'cause
would-
it's
you would have
CBS.
those
They could do
actors.
that.
You
It's
could have the
actual
actors.
CBS.
Yeah. Okay.
So they could do that.
yeah,
Um,
that would be a fun way to bring
I
them back.
I think
too,
you'd
for like a
you'd have
reunion.
to
It
go.
would be a weird.
You'd have to go to
kind of
classics though. Like you'd have to go to really pop, like Cheers or Seinfeld, like the really big ones, wouldn't you?
My Two Dads.
Oh, Stephanie beat.
Sorry.
What's her name? I forget her name.
Yeah, I think so. It's true. Alien Nation.
Alien Nation. Oh wow.
Actually, it makes no sense that The Simpsons are never referenced in Star Trek.
They are referenced the other way around, and the actors have all been from Patrick Stewart all the way to all. I think all of
Probably.
them have been on The Simpsons.
But
the
we've never seen The
in the
Simpsons.
holodeck. That would be cool.
that would be fun.
They could do that for sure.
But then, like, how do you do that though? Is it animated? Do you have your live action
Yes.
protagonist from Star Trek? Do you paint him? Do
Wouldn't
you
it
do you
be
do an
neat
animated
if-
version of him? Do you paint him yellow?
Wouldn't it be neat? Yeah, wouldn't it be neat if wouldn't it be neat if the holodeck could actually make you believe you were a 2D animated, like through optics? Like when you put your hand in front of your face, it redraws a 2-dimensional hand, like a cartoon hand. So what your eye actually sees is 2D animation. So like you could go into The Simpsons and be a Simpsons character and actually feel what it's like to be in that
But
2-dimensional.
I don't think
The
it feels like
holodeck
anything.
can't do that though, right?
I mean, I just described a sequence that in which you could apply technology to make it happen. I think the holodeck could do things that we don't see on screen. I mean, like there's some really clever uses, like when Geordi uses it to recreate Utopia Planitia and things like that that you don't even think about. But imagine all the other things you could actually, as we've seen also in Star Trek, you could turn the holodeck into a node. Like you could potentially turn it into a auxiliary bridge if you needed to, and all the controls would be connected to the same systems as on the bridge. So there's a lot of potentials for the holodeck that I think are unexplored.
I think it's just very energy consuming. I think that's the problem with the holodeck. Like it's
Right.
always
That's the
implied
problem
that
with the holodeck.
if you have all of the holodecks running at the same time, like simultaneously, then it's a big power drain because it generates it takes up so much energy. I think though that in the next generation, it's kind of implied or explained, or the next generation onward, that holodecks, like, you do really feel the cold. You can't really get wet, that kind of stuff. So there's no reason why.
Yeah,
there's
it's a
no
very
reason why,
immersive
like, if you were to go
experience,
into like if you were to go into Toy Story, and you were to hug a teddy bear, there's no reason why you couldn't feel the softness of the teddy bear. But then, would you be animated, would the character, would the Star Trek character be animated?
You wouldn't be, but to
No.
other people on the holodeck, you could look animated. The holodeck could create a layer over you that makes you into an animated
sleeve
character,
of
so
some
that other
kind.
people looking at you, yeah, and so other people looking at you would see you as Homer Simpson or whatever or what.
So why do people wear costumes into the holodeck?
Well, I think again, what Sean said, it's like, perhaps that's part of the fun is you don't want to have it. Maybe it's not a perfect technology. Maybe it works for things like cartoons, but it's harder to reproduce like movement of clothing and things like that. It's like I like to use Doctor Who a lot to explain technology on Star Trek because I think Doctor Who often does a better job of some of the same concepts. Like the TARDIS can generate rooms and at will you could create a room or decommission it. And that's kind of like, imagine a starship that was all a holodeck, like a gigantic holodeck starship.
I wouldn't feel safe though.
To right, if it failed, it's a big failure. But on the TARDIS, we get away with it because it's Time Lord technology is infallible, right? So it's so good that you're like, you trust it completely. And we just don't have that same faith for Star Trek technology because we see the Enterprise failing all the time. But in principle, it works very much the same way.
This is how I've always explained this. Oh, Doctor. You want to know? I've always explained it in my mind as if you had a personal holodeck, like your own personal holodeck in your quarters, then you could use the holodeck to kind of do the clothes over you as like an extra layer on top of you. But that's because you could walk into the holodeck in your underpants, right? So,
Doctor Who again. The Doctor's naked underneath his clothing for the Christmas special.
You see,
and
no, wait. You see what I mean?
And then he says,
no.
And then he says, "Aren't we all naked underneath our clothes?"
No. What I mean is, if I'm wearing clothes and then I want the holodeck to recreate like a bathing suit, then it's gonna have trouble taking away the clothes that are already on me. So what you do is you go in basically naked or in your underpants, but they can't do that on the Enterprise because then you're walking in the hallway. Like, you'd have to take your clothes off once you get to the holodeck or something. It's awkward. If there's a failure, then everyone's in there, and it becomes a Star Trek Enterprise episode where everyone is nude for no reason. So,
oh my
Or
goodness!
Deep Space Nine.
they didn't have too many holodeck malfunction program episodes, though, didn't they?
No, I guess not. But I can
No.
imagine people doing that on Deep Space Nine.
Deep Space Nine does
Well,
take
yeah. Well, that's the thing.
holographic-
It's I feel like all of his holosuites were very adult oriented.
Right.
Quark's holosuite.
Well, and they also take, with Vic Fontaine, they take holographic people to a different level too, and then of course that continues in Voyager.
See, that's the thing. That it's,
and beyond.
Vic Fontaine is someone that I forget, did they invent him or was he someone that existed in the Star Trek universe before they made him into a holodeck program?
He existed in real life, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
And he was recreated in the holodecks. So he was an old time character.
But they could
But I have to my memory's a little foggy. I have to, I'm always.
they
drunk
could
when
do
I'm watching
Adele
Deep Space Nine
or
these
something,
days.
right?
They could, right? Adele would be a great. If she wanted to be a regular on Star Trek, she could be a Vic Fontaine for today's Star Trek, or someone like her.
Wait. Are you saying Vic Fontaine's a real singer?
No, well, in Star Trek,
in Star
he was a
Trek.
real
Okay, got
singer.
it. Okay.
Right, he was a real.
All right.
He's one of those fictional characters that was real in
Yeah.
the past.
Yeah,
if
he's
I'm
like a
not
Bobby
mistaken,
Darin
of Star
type
Trek.
or a Frank Sinatra
exactly.
type. Okay, gotcha. You know what? I think that's something that, I don't know if that counts for this discussion, but certainly musicians, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, Sean, with what's his name, with Stephen Hawking's, real life people. I mean, certainly musicians, artists, I mean, those kinds of stunt casting, I think would have been interesting, if there had been an episode where, I know there was an episode where Picard is learning how to paint, and they would have had this guy, what's that, Bob, whatever, I don't know if he probably wasn't alive.
Bob
Ross is there.
Who was around?
Yeah.
That would have been
That,
amazing.
that would have been hilarious.
and very fortunate because he's such an icon today. That would have been a very fortunate
Yeah,
cameo.
but so I'm totally open for that kind of crossover. Of course, that's crossing over with real life. But in terms of fictional crossovers, there's certain science fiction properties that I would not, I think I outlined already: Doctor Who, Alien, Predator. But some things I wouldn't mind seeing. I think would be comical or humorous. I mean, we already kind of saw Flash Gordon. I think Buck Rogers, which is kind of in the same vein, although that's older.
And I just want to throw Highlander, the TV series, in the hat as well, because it was a show that you could easily see being around in Star Trek universe.
Which one?
Highlander, the TV show.
Oh, well, Highlander I think could exist in universe.
Oh, well, look at that. Okay, well, fine.
But
that's the ultimate crossover. The next captain of the Enterprise is actually an immortal.
well, they're hiding among us, right? That we don't have to know.
It's true.
So
it's true. There can be only one. It's brilliant. You're right.
I need to see this. I've heard so much about Highlander. You're talking about the film series?
we're talking about everything.
Well, you should watch the films. Yeah, but we love the TV series
Okay.
too, which kind of went in a different direction, but also it was cool. It was very cool how they did it. It was very neat how the TV series connected to everything.
Okay.
Going back to the Voyager episode, I think something a way around, because there's obviously copyrights, and different studios would be like, wait a minute, you can't use this and all that. I think an interesting way they might be able to work around it is, and I was thinking about the holodeck. I'm sorry, the holosuite on Deep Space Nine, where you have different races and different cultures going through. It would be funny if the holosuites somehow merged, let's say, popular programs. Let's say, for example, I was saying before, what if the Klingons watched Betty Boop? What if the Klingons watched Friends, and there's a Klingon version of Friends? So what you do is you don't have Friends like with the you have
the
it in Klingon
version
on the
That's
holodeck.
so much better than anything I've ever
hit
heard.
me.
I'm so glad this podcast got to this point.
That
Just to hear
hit
that.
me. The moment you started saying Klingons, I had like a Cardassian Spider-Man in my mind. This is brilliant. I love it.
Oh my god!
So I mean, it's
That's
the way we
ultimate.
have
That's
now. We have things
we've
that are
reached the
translated into
conclusion. I
different
love it.
languages. So what if Friends gets
It's so
translated
true.
into Klingons? So you can have the actors.
Well, we know
come,
Shakespeare. There's
and they're wearing Klingon makeup.
there's an in-universe thing that backs you up, which is the Klingons and their Shakespeare obsession. So it kind of makes
Exactly.
That's a problem. You want to do
Yeah.
your Downton Abbey program, but it's all friggin' Vulcans, right? Or something.
Oh God, that's hilarious.
brilliant.
Oh, that's
That
the
would be even better.
Downton
Oh
Abbey
my
and the original Vulcan is the only way to experience Downton Abbey. I will say that, hands down.
Classic. I think that's a perfect conclusion. I think that's a brilliant end to this discussion.
I second that. That was so good.
All right.
Oh man.
Audience at home, what do you guys think of this? I don't know how you can leave a comment on the podcast itself. You can check out the YouTube video if you want to leave a comment. I think that Anchor enables you maybe to leave comments, or any other, like maybe you can send an email. I don't know. Anyway, what do you?
Podcasters like to email. So you
Podcasters
can invite
like to
people to
email?
email you.
All right.
Yeah, so you could do podcast listeners, I guess.
It is. It's trick on the two at gmail.com is what it is. If you feel compelled.
You should try to grab trekchat@gmail.com before this airs too, just so you have one.
Oh, that's right.
Just
I
like
should.
trekchat@gmail.com. Try it, audience. It might be working.
You're promoting an email address that might or might not work.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you guys so much for being on. It was
Thank
awesome.
you.
We finished on
enjoyable.
the most brilliant of conclusions. It was amazing.
It was so much fun. I really appreciate you having me on, and I loved it. This topic.
It's always an honor having you back on. And Doctor, I've seen you comment so much on the other episodes. It was only a matter of time before you came on yourself. So
I'm very honored to be here, and I really enjoy your channel. So it's
no, it's very kind.
it's great.
All right. Well, live long and prosper, guys. Continue to stay safe because the COVID-19 situation is not over. So keep on self-isolating, and does it need to be said? Don't inject disinfectants into yourselves
Oh,
or drink
God.
bleach
Oh,
or
man.
anything like that.
Yeah, please don't.
Unless you're a white supremacist or some kind of.
I'm gonna
racist
go
or
out on a
bigot,
limb
please,
and
by all
say that
means.
if you're listening to a Star Trek related podcast, you might not be into drinking bleach. I'm gonna assume
True.
that.
That's
Yeah.
true. I think it's safe. I think it's a safe
I
assumption.
think we're a pretty good fandom here. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Live long and prosper.